Welcome everyone. My name is Cara Feeney. I'm the Director of Exhibitions here at the Evanston Art Center. So I want to welcome you to the Art Center today. We're here to speak to two amazing artists who you'll get to learn all about today. A few housekeeping rules. We are on Zoom here. So if you could make sure that you're on mute while you're here so we can hear the artists behind us. And then also, if you have any questions for either of the artists, please type it in the chat function. You'll find that at the bottom toolbar of your screen, and we will have a question and answer portion at the end of the event. So we're excited to have you here. And I would like to introduce Paula Danoff, our President and CEO.
Thanks, Cara. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are so excited about this amazing show. I can't wait to show you all everything that's here. It's very inspirational. I would like to introduce our moderator this evening. His name is Steve Juras. He's an artist, educator, and facilitator of art practices. His work has been exhibited at the Hyde Park Arts Center, the Fulton Street Collective, the Evanston Arts Center, the Highland Park Center, and the Trailside Museum of Natural History, among many other places. His work is also part of an artist collective called Art et al. And has been presented in Copenhagen, Mexico City, Los Angeles, and Darmstadt, Germany. Juras is also a recipient of the Working Artist Grant. Currently, we have the honor of having him teaching contemporary art at the Evanston Arts Center, and he also maintains a coaching practice for artists. Without further ado, I give you Steve Juras. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Paula, for that wonderful introduction. And I, in turn, would like to introduce Morgan Craig and Sherl Rush, the two painters that we'll be talking to today. I'm going to start by introducing Sheri. Sherl Rush is a Chicago-based painter whose practice includes photography and collage. Rush holds a BFA from Texas Christian University and an MFA from the University of Chicago. Her work explores the ineradicable nature of memory and recollection and the contemporary diminishing experience of the sublime. Recent exhibitions include the Rockford Art Museum, Ralph Arnott Gallery, the Arts Center Highland Park, and a solo show here. A solo show at the Hyde Park Art Center. Recent awards include a fully funded residency to the Pouch Cove Foundation in Newfoundland and a grant from the Illinois Art Council Agency to fund this show at the Art Center. So, welcome, Sheri.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Literally trying to turn the page here. Morgan, thanks for making the trip here today, despite a couple of delays, so we're very happy to have you here. Morgan Craig has exhibited throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia, including spaces in Cleveland, the Delaware Center for Contemporary Arts, and the Australian National University. Craig has received numerous awards, including the Pollock Krasner Foundation Grant, twice, the Elizabeth Greenshields Foundation Grant, once again, twice, and the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Fellowship, you guessed it, twice. He has also been invited to several residencies, including Cité Internationale des Arts, the MacDowell Colony, UCross, Trek de Fabrica in Moscow, and Red Gate in Beijing. Selections from his oeuvre were recently featured in several solo exhibitions, including Vanderbilt, University of Central Florida, and Colorado State University. Last summer, he participated in residencies at Paul Art Space St. Louis, Missouri, the Resident Artist Program in Silver City, Nevada, and the Menandi Art Space in Lusaka, Zambia. This past fall, he had a solo exhibition at Binghamton University. And later this year, he will have a solo exhibition at Western Nevada College in Carson City, Nevada. Well, Morgan, let's we're going to stick here and talk about some of your work. And I'd like to start here with this piece. If I'm correct, this is the oldest piece that you have in the show?
This is the oldest piece.
Yeah, in like, what was it, 2015 or so?
Correct.
And as we'll go through the show, we'll kind of see that a lot of your work has like this deep space to it. And it's all interior, working in the interior. And this is the only piece, except for maybe the piece around the corner.
Yes, that's an exterior.
That's an exterior as well. So I wonder if you could talk about the movement that you've made from these exteriors to the interiors, and maybe start on where this piece is coming from for you.
Well, theoretically speaking, this piece reminds me, reminiscent of Deleuze and Gautier, their theories of deterritorialization.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the ghost cities that litter the landscape of China.
Mm-hmm.
This is another example of, I guess, the Chinese Communist Party, I guess in some ways a great leap forward. But unlike Mao's, I think that they're trying to keep the amount of deaths down. So anyway, what it is basically these ghost cities were a mass move. They want to do like, they want to spread out with like monocrops and factory farms and so forth. And in order to do that, they need to push the peasants off of the land,
Mm-hmm.
move them from the agrarian lifestyle into the city. So they created these cities with the idea that the people would just move into.
Yeah. Does that agrarian move to the city? I mean, I'm intrigued by the title of the piece and having
The
Needleless
Needleless
Haystacks.
Haystacks. Well, yeah, that's a play upon that in the sense that these cities are empty because the people wouldn't move, or a lot of the people didn't, and continue to stay put. And there's been multiple, maybe not multiple, but there's been several documentaries about showing this conflict between the people and the government as far as getting them to be able to deracinate them from the land that they've lived in or lived.
I mean, and that's what capital will do.
Right. Oh, yes.
And so I wanted to I say that because I want to take one step back and talk about the title of your show and what you're summoning with the title of Specter of Capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the full title? Am I getting that?
No, some great reward.
Yeah.
Specters of Capital.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a takeoff of Derrida's Specters of Mars. And Mark Fisher expanded upon that even further, English theorist. As well as he wrote a lot about sound.
Yeah.
And the notion of how a certain generation, between like Generation X and I guess the millennials, there was such this scream, this neoliberal capitalism uproar over like we were just pushing forward to the future, and things were going faster, and iPhones and what have you, left and right. It just seemed like it was going to go on forever, but then it didn't, and it's become very stagnant.
Yeah.
It's left many of both generations disillusioned and desultory. And, you know, at the same time, I think that many of these spaces or these interiors represent these specters of capital. This is what they've left behind.
Yeah, they're these ghosts.
Yes,
The spaces are haunted.
right.
In a certain way.
Yeah, they still are very much so. By those that gave their lives.
Yeah.
Working.
I want to take a step towards the painting and talk about just some technical things in which how you actually make your work, how your make takes its form. Your work for me has a sort of a cinematic quality. By cinematic, I mean, and we'll see a couple of the paintings in a little bit. But there's a painting of a warehouse, and it's just deep perspective. And it is, especially these exterior shots, that it's less, less painting and more cinematography in a certain way. And I bring up photography and cinema, so I'm wondering how are you painting from photographs? Or are you painting from direct experience?
It's really an amalgam of two things. Some of it's from memory, some of it's from sketches, and yes, some of it is from photographs. I have to work from photographs. Sometimes, like in the instance of this, multiple photographs. So this is not exactly how it looked.
Yeah, sure.
In many ways, this is like what Proust spoke about, and what Benjamin spoke about. It's like the idea of the painter, or even Adorno. So there's, you know, I manipulate the lighting. Also, I play with the perspective. Really, this heighten the emotional qualities to really convince the feeling of being within the space, so that it's just not, it's beyond photography.
Yeah. I mean, we can, before we make that, I was just interested in the skies and these. I think of haystacks. You think of Monet. You think of the different light that falls on each of these buildings. And it's denatured in a certain way. That's how it hits me. And in that sense, like, I do want to step into some of these spaces. But for this piece, like, I feel the most alienated from it. Which is why I think this piece is really important. As like a touchstone to pivot to some of your other work. So why don't we do that now?
Okay, great. Do you have a piece you want to go to?
Let's go to this piece. So this piece is 2 years later. It's 2017. It has, what's the title of this piece is
Obsolescence, but in English, it's the spirit of the staircase. To take off the idea of like.
So if you guys could both come a little
Sorry
closer,
about
we've
that.
had some requests about sound.
It's a reference to Denis Diderot and how he talks about how, like, you don't realize what you should have said or what you should have done until you're at the bottom of the stairs, until the moment has passed, and you can't get it back, and it's lost. And in instances such as this, this was part of a rectory and a facility that was where Mark Twain had originally lived for a period in St. Louis. And the gentleman that owned it, it was a classic case of gentrification where the land beneath it was worth more than the property that stood upon it. So he was in the process of just basically letting it demolition by neglect, more or less. That never got to that point because he was so lackadaisical about security and what have you that arsonists got to it first, and it's now gone.
Yeah, again, it's a really interesting piece to contrast to or counterpoint to the Needleless Haystack, because it's a dizzying perspective. I mean, you can't help but be.
Have a little vertigo.
For me, I can't help but be in it. Like it's sort of irresistible. You kind of want to. I mean, it's a stairway, obviously. No pun intended. You do want to step into it or peer ever further over that edge. And the concept that you just talked about, that spirit of the staircase. Again, it's just this haunting that keeps re-emerging or just keeps emerging through your work. And I know that in your own description of your work, you talked about ontology.
Yeah, that's Derrida and Fisher.
Yeah. And then this begs the question as we go through your work. There's a point where, well, it's this intersection of painting, the history of painting, and political philosophy, and when did that start happening for you?
Ooh. I guess it started happening as far as, I'd say probably in grad school.
Yeah.
It just kept blooming. It really all began with Proust. And then it just went from there.
And you had to read a lot of Proust to get past him.
Yeah, I did. I read all the books.
Yeah.
It was quite a feat. But, so that's, and I guess one of the other the two big influences artistically was Caspar David Friedrich and Piranesi. His prison series, his etchings.
Yeah.
Prison etchings were really.
And I had read an interview with you at some juncture, but there was a specific painting teacher you had too at some point that had sort of really helped you made a switch. And then maybe it was about
it was
painting in these kind of spaces.
It was in undergrad. I took a landscape painting class, and the professor would take us to various locations throughout the tri-state area.
Yeah.
And one place he took us was out into the middle of Pennsylvania, where it was all coal country. So he took us to the St. Nicholas coal breaker, which was at one point right after World War II was the largest coal breaker in the world. And it has since, it's been shut down for ages. So we had to sign a release and all to get on the property. And, we were kind of walking around. And then he said, okay, he's like, you can go wherever you want on the property. Just, don't go into the breaker and don't go into any of this. There was a shaft that ran from the top of the hill down into the breaker.
Yeah.
And he said, don't go into that either.
So that's where you went.
So that's exactly where I went. And that's where
everyone went.
The other two went. And we kind of circled around the property so that we could get up there without them seeing, because there was a fair amount of students in the class. And, he's walking around, and there was also a security guard. So, so it was really like, it was crazy because it was like the thrill of this edifice before us, and then at the same time there was this question or threat of getting caught, and it was just like just the adrenaline, because the stairs to get into the place, because you want to go inside, you don't just want to go outside. So the stairs are on the outside, the exterior, so there's steps missing. So we're like jumping over steps as we're trying to get up this thing as fast. This was probably, I'd say, 3 or 4 stories. Yeah. So you're trying to get up it as fast as you can, because they can see you down at the bottom of the hill. So then we get inside, and then I just was like, I was hit with this like redolent air, and then the light, and it just was, I don't know. And then I walked over. And then I looked down the shaft, and I just was confronted with all of this luminous color, shadow, and abstractions and so forth. And it was at that point, it was like, this is what I want. Yeah. This is what I want to capture. I'm not exactly sure of like what direction I was going to go, but I was like, this is definitely material.
Yeah, it sounds like this moment where, or what this professor was asking to do, is like, we're not in nature right now. Like, this is now post-industrial nature, and that's what you've come into. And it's just, as you were describing, it's a whole different world. It's a whole different light. It's a whole different materials.
Right.
That said,
in many ways, it's a confrontation between nature and mankind.
Yeah.
And it's, it speaks of the destruction of capital, but then at the same time, you see nature coming back in, trying to restore itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely speaks of Marx's take on the whole metabolic rift.
Yeah. Let's swing back around this way to get kind of that wide shot.
Okay.
Because it goes back to that quality of space that I was talking about at the beginning. And that cinematic quality where it's like going from the wide, the medium, and the tight in a certain way. Actually, can you get that shot?
And it's getting long. Should I go through more asking friends?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. So this kind of burnt out, golden hued, deep warehouse space.
It's actually
Just to remind me, if you guys, we've had some requests for volume.
it's actually the Packard motor car Detroit machine.
No kidding. Yeah. Two things that I've noticed in that piece. I think it's the only presence of a figure I can find anywhere in here. Although maybe there's one in the staircase piece. No. I'm not quite sure.
No, you're correct. That's a human being.
Yeah, I'm going to force you to tell me what it is. Of course.
To be honest, I felt like it. It worked.
Yeah.
In terms of like alienation.
Right.
That kind of trajectory of thought. So for me, at the same time, the figure is faceless, the figure is nameless. It's just a shape.
Right.
It's a being.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And again, in terms of the technical aspects of making that painting, is this a similar process of like photographs and sketches and memory all coming together to construct?
Yeah, yeah. They basically, yeah. It's you know, I put the photo, like the photo or photos off to the side of the canvas, and then I draw from either from the sketches, from memory, and from the images, photos, and then I you know, I build a drawing, and then I do several multiple layers of paint to make it pop.
Yeah. In this, there's
I also establish, you know, because with linear perspective, it's also a form of correction, because as you know, with photography,
you're gonna get
everything's fisheye and distorted.
Yeah, it's a lot of juggling to do all the time with a piece like that. They're super detailed. All of your work. I think everyone would probably want to know, like, how laborious are these for you to make in terms of time? And I am also interested is the effect on your body that these paintings demand.
You mean the impact on my back and on my hands?
On your physical body.
Oh well, it's gotten to the these paintings take you know, I don't know. It depends on the size. Anywhere from somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 120 hours. That's without like mixing. That's just sheer work. And it's crazy because I had acute minor ulnar neuropathy in my arm one time because I had been working so much that it just gave out. It was like it did, but see, it decided to really give out when I was in a residency in the middle of nowhere in Finland. So, and I was going to be there for 2 months. So I basically had become ambidextrous. And I painted left-handed because otherwise I was going to just lose my mind.
I mean, the irony is that the painting's about capital, and you relate capital to labor, the effects on labor, on the worker. It sort of starts to have this really interesting effect on the painter, who's painting about capital, whose body starts to
deteriorate.
It's like it's like inescapable. Or like
especially since, you know, this artists and what have you are so often looked upon as like, you know, this should all be free because you enjoy doing it. So therefore, you know, why should you be paid for this, or why should you be paid a fair and just amount?
Well, I'll put up a nice conceptual artwork for you. I'll put up my doctor's bill, and then you can put a pin in that. You can see what that costs as an artist to do that work. leave me to do that one. You guys don't have to. You guys don't have to do it. Now I can't help but ask the question. In any way, do these paintings haunt you?
How so?
Well, it has this effect on your body.
Oh yeah, some of them really do.
And I guess in the sense of you work on them for 120 hours. That's a lot of time to keep it there. To keep that image there, to keep that intention there. I guess it's a question you can ask any artist, is when you move from piece to piece, what follows you around, or what sort of ghosts you as you move around.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, some of them do haunt me.
Yeah.
Especially those ones that I did left-handed, and the couple that caused me to lose the ability to work with my right hand.
Yeah.
But but some of them not so much.
Yeah. What time do we have here? It's 5:40, which is great. Let's talk about, which one do I want to talk about? Oh, this one. This is my favorite title. Built and erected merely to become sterile and flaccid. Pretty good title.
Yes, this is actually the Armory Meatpacking Plant in East St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer standing. That was just a case of a classic example of consolidation, monopolization of the meatpacking industry. And, they just shut this facility down. A lot of people lost their jobs, and I don't know if you've ever been to East St. Louis, but
I've been very close. Yes. Yeah.
It's seen better days.
Certainly. And we can't see the difference now. But the color palette on this piece is decidedly different from anything else that you have in the show. And it's almost these acid colors. I think is that the right word I want to use? Like this piece reminds me of like the kind of painting and flourishes you'd see like on a carousel. And there's something, at least for me, that just struck me immediately about something carnival-like. And there's there's a specter behind that, as well. There's something happening at the dark side of town.
Right.
It's the carnival.
Right. The edge of town.
Yeah. Yeah, that's simply an impression.
But the thing is that I did heighten the color in this space, but some of these colors are pretty much representative of the plan. It really was, I thought in terms of color, like absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Just what was initially there, and then over time with entropy, what nature
is going to do. Yeah. I meant to ask you earlier too. How are you accessing these spaces? Or you just find your way in?
Yeah, I just kind
Yeah.
of. Some of the spaces are done through universities or colleges. Like I'll have a show somewhere and I'll see some spaces that might be of interest in the town or what have you. Or I will apply for an exhibition or show in a city or a town where I know that there's material for me.
Yeah.
And then I will ask the university or the college to make a phone call. And they have a lot more power than I do. I have none. Most of these places, like there's a couple, and there was one that I got into that's actually a wireworks facility. None of these are from there, which is actually a function of the century, turn of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Facility, and the guy was he's like, wow. He's like, I don't know who you are. He's like, nobody gets in
Yeah.
here. And he's like, but, you know, you're in, not only are you in here, but you're in here with a camera. And he's like, see, so that's like a perfect example of like where there's no time to just sit and take sketches and do plein air painting. Like the guy was like literally like kind of like tapping his foot, like, all right, I'm leaving you around here. Take your pictures and get out.
They're just like, OSHA. Oh no, don't call OSHA.
Yeah, OSHA. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good point for us to wrap up your portion of going through your work, and now we will spin over to Sheri's stuff.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Morgan. Let's start with the title of your show.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a good framing device.
That's
for us
very,
to begin.
the title actually comes from, this is the source material for this particular body of work was a particular trip that I had to make down to Florida suddenly one January. And I had been asked by my youngest godchild to come down and spend the family week with her. She was at a rehab facility in Florida. And it sort of leveled for me. The name is actually kind of two-layered. It's the name of the place. It references the name of the place. And it references that landscape, the woods, the tropical forest, that everything has always been my refuge. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of multi-layered in that way. So yeah, this body of work is from, I take a lot of photos on my cell phone, and a body of work always is one trip, because there's something that permeates that whole being. And so this entire body of work was from that particular trip.
So I'd like to go back to kind of the rudiments of these paintings, and we can build them back up to understand kind of decisions you've made with this work. Right now, we can see on this piece that's called, is this Eyes on Emma? Is that the name of this piece?
Yeah, but the one that's shown on the screen is You Look Like You Belong Here.
Okay. So we can see on the screen there's like this framing element on the top left and another one on the bottom right.
Yes.
You know, I know you've done for a long time pieces that don't have this framing device, and I'm wondering if that was more, if those pieces were more about landscape, the idea of landscape.
I think landscape is always the tool I use, and it's definitely what I'm talking about well, you know, there's an overall project and there's a smaller project. The overall project being the layers that we look through things. Everything's kind of taken on a new meaning now, but back before the COVID-19, I mean, the layers and the reflections and the windows and the screens we look through has taken on a whole new meaning. But before that, I was thinking in terms of how people experience everything around them through their phone, probably through a window of a car, a train, or what have you, literally building these layers. And then, you know, just seeking out a postable image. And then, of course, everyone experiences this place through the postable image. So that's what I talk about when I'm talking about layers and whatnot. The layers. So in particular to this work, yes, there is this framing, and that's because I found myself in a car by myself early in the morning in some tropical, amazing woods, and the light was coming up, and it was amazing. And I usually take my source material as a passenger in the car, but I was the only person around by myself. And I said I had to shoot this. So I shot him from the driver's side while driving, and because there was no one around, they tend to put these places out in the middle of nowhere, and so there I was. So when I made the decision, when I was looking at the paintings or looking to set up the paintings, I made the decision to put in that framing because, I don't know, maybe it's a little heavy-handed, but I mean, definitely to me, it was a coming together of the interior and exterior world, because that's what this type of transformation, that's what this type of reflection is. And, so I guess that, I don't know, I guess that's sort of obvious symbolism. There is a simplification of that symbolism, but what have you. I liked the framing device because I sort of simplify the reflections, and I take off these geometric forms, and that's where you see the lights, the reflections, and to me it was sort of a framing device that worked with that.
And like without that framing device, and I know you've done many pieces without it.
Yeah.
It sort of comes to you as an abstraction.
I see. Right.
I mean, there's a story behind how you make that abstraction for sure.
Yes, especially with me. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the addition of just this little hint of this framing element, like a story comes in immediately.
It does bag the narrative, yes.
Yeah.
And I even made reference that it was a car, because you see the rearview mirror. So yeah, it could be I got carried away with that.
That's not
but,
well,
it was interesting because when we hung the show, it became very apparent, and we even hung the show by seeing how they all work together, particularly those elements, so it's sort of interesting in the end when you sit back and look, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's very particular to this body of work. Yeah.
So it might not be there forever.
It might not ever be there again.
You might not keep doing it.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to now talk about, like we did with Morgan, and how technically these pieces come together.
Okay.
In your technique, and I think
should we move around to some other imagery?
Yeah, I think maybe Cara, if we can go to the big one.
Okay.
Sheri, how large is this piece that we're looking at?
This is it 9 by 11 or 8 by 11?
I think it's 8.
That just left me. Is it 8?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it's 8.
Yeah.
8 by 11. This is my biggest piece to date. Although I would love to do a big mural, but yeah. So that's about as big as I can go in my studio.
Yeah. So I'll ask you the same question that I asked of Morgan, which is, what does working in this way do to your body?
Well, as I said before, age never sleeps, so it's getting tougher. My work process is pretty active, and I guess I'm having a little bit more issues about getting around this kind of real estate, but it takes longer than it did. It's interesting, and that's something I started exploring in the show. Was I started exploring scale and what that meant to my imagery, and how I could play with that, because my goal has always been, my beginnings are in abstract expressionism, so my goal is always bigger, bigger, better, whatever, just to have the viewer walk into that world.
It really highlights something between your work and Morgan's work about space, how deep that space is, and how your relationship to the piece is itself. As I stand here, please disagree with me
Okay.
about what I'm about to say.
Okay.
It's going to be really scandalous.
No doubt.
That the abstract passage here, like almost like hits me in the face.
Yeah.
Like I can't, and maybe this is not your intention, so it doesn't matter. Like I can't penetrate it. It's so thick.
Yeah, it's that's sort of the weirdness of, because there's this flatness that knocks you out while there is a space that you can maneuver into. And I mean, when I came back to using landscape and I started this kind of overall project of it was sort of a critique of the new generation of people. It was really a critique of people putting that kind of layers between them and the landscape, the sublime, the what have you. And so those reflections off of all those lenses does keep you out, and it was entirely intentional.
Yeah.
But I found it a very satisfying, since painters play with process and formal ideas and everything else, it was a very satisfying place to stay and explore for me. And I do try to add a depth as well as build the problematic layers.
Right. Can we step in a little bit more to get a detail? Because I just want to talk about, again, how you construct these pieces.
Okay.
I think I've always known you to be a drip painter.
Right.
And they're everywhere. They're going everywhere.
I chose drips because the first question when I was thinking about this project, what was it, 2015, 2016, I knew that there had to be something that depicts motion, and I wasn't going to blur. I just wasn't going to blur. So I wasn't going to. So I decided to go with drips. I love Pat Sear. I could never do what she does, and it's very different. Because mine are about flattening the plane and depicting motion. And I turn my canvases. I work in the horizontal, then I turn vertically. So especially the vertical drips, really act as large, long brush strokes that brings things together. It's weird because the minute you drop a line over organic shapes, because I build up with spray, then acrylic, and then I switch to oil. I mean, the minute you drip a line of any sort over organic, you're going to get a space, and it kind of reasserts the flatness of the plane, yet it gives you a big space. So it was pretty fascinating to me. So I think, I did get carried away for sure.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. Someone has to do it.
You're right.
And you're good at it. So,
Go figure.
Maybe this is my last question. Maybe not.
Okay.
Glitter.
Yeah. I love materials and I love that people use glitter in their work now. And again, that's sort of a multi-layered thing for me because I guess if I had to sum this work up, this particular body of work, this show, up in a nutshell, I would say that it's about an inner transformation. And for me, the glitter was sort of the ultimate. It's a magical element. It's a mystical element. It's sort of along with the light quality, the quality of the glittering light coming up in the early morning through a tropical forest. honestly, it has a lot to do with my godchildren too. I mean, when I think of my youngest godchild, I think of glitter, because they grew up in my studio, painting in my studio, and that she loves glitter, and my entire apartment always, and I'm sure it still does, and that space has glitter in it. So there were a lot of things I was thinking about when I got to finally use glitter.
What a day.
Yeah, it was. It was a very exciting day. Yeah.
It's strange times now, but when do you find yourself going on the next trip?
It's funny because all my source material comes from trips that are never planned. Or, I'm always on a mission.
Yeah.
I always have to go do something, and I find myself in a car.
Yeah.
So no, except what I had planned was I did a residency in Newfoundland, and it was very isolated, and I took about 2,000 pictures there. So I suspect that might enter into my work, especially now that isolation has taken on a whole new meaning. It's sort of weird how now's the time, right? We need to talk about that, but no, that's probably in my future, that body of work. So no trips planned, man. I'm staying sheltered.
Yeah. I'm not going to add anything.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sheri.
Yeah, thank you.
Sharing about your work. It's really,
thank you.
really extraordinary. Yeah, so I sent Sheri and Morgan a few questions a couple days ago just to keep in mind. And I thought now would be a good time to go over a few of those. And some are light and some are heavy. So I'll start with a light one. What have you been listening to, reading, or what have you experienced over the past 10 days of note, if anything has struck you?
In 10 days recently?
No, or just in the recent past.
In the recent past?
Yeah, which could be yesterday.
That's very different than,
Or it could be like yesterday, the day before.
I've gone from grunge to cool jazz. Morgan.
In the June issue of Monthly Review, which is a socialist publication, there's a great article entitled "How Che Guevara Taught Cuba to Confront COVID-19" by Don Fitz. Fitz elucidates how Guevara felt in order to have a firm grasp of a disease, in his case, leprosy, one must live within those that have it. Guevara wanted to understand the ontology of the afflicted, so as to get the essence of the virus and asphyxiate it. Fitz then goes on to discuss how Cuban doctors and nurses, using Guevara as a paradigm, reside in the neighborhoods where they have offices. Despite U.S. sanctions, the Cubans were able to crush the virus with medical acumen, keeping the virus localized rather than having it reach a level of community spread where it is rampant and out of control. Cuba kept its death toll in the single digits. Hospitals also implemented a 45-day isolation period for all medical personnel, preventing COVID-19 from metastasizing in the community. Cuba continued with its humanitarian aid by sending a myriad of doctors and nurses to various countries in the global south to assist with quelling of the virus. Mutual aid is ostensible, as the healthcare professionals not only seek to heal, but to educate and consequently prevent higher casualty levels. Whatever Cuba develops, it is certain that it will be shared, Fitz states. unlike US medications that are patented at taxpayers' expense, so that private pharmaceutical giants can price gouge those who need the medication. So, excellent article. That was just my little summary of it.
Yeah,
That
thank
is
you.
what I've read this week.
Yeah,
It's much bigger and broader, but Cuba really is awesome.
well, this is a perfect pivot then to my next question, which was, how is COVID-19 and or the calls to dismantle systems of racism and oppression affected, underscored, amplified, changed your work? Again, if at all.
Well, for me, I've struggled mentally during this time. I mean, it's made me much quieter, and I was able to work in my studio most of the time. So I kept painting for the show for a bit, but then everything changed, and I started working at home in my little workshop, and so my work grew very quiet, and I really explored. I explored bringing stuff down to a very small scale and just exploring that space. That sort of, for me, I mean, the news is almost overwhelming to me. I know. So I kind of have chose to live in my isolated little. So,
Your refuge.
Yeah, my refuge. Exactly.
Where we,
Yeah.
Morgan? You know,
Yeah.
it's a small subject.
Yeah, it's really. I too have been. With each day, it's like the news is like a cudgel, just like nonstop, and it's just each day it just seems like it's more and more upsetting. And I think that my work and like a lot of the message that I've been trying to convey over all these years that I've been dealing with this is that all of this, the root of all of this is the system. It's the system that we exist under. And how it is based on paradox, it's based on extraction, exploitation, destruction, and waste. It's now to the point where, with this coronavirus, everybody's like stressing about it, and in the meantime, there's fires in the Arctic, and the temperature has reached 100 degrees, and the permafrost is melting. And what people don't understand is when the permafrost melts, all those things that it is stored in that ice will be released, all those toxins.
Right.
And if you think this plague is bad, we have no idea what's coming. And it's really, not to be fatalistic, it's more fun, but, it's reality.
Yeah.
It's just overwhelming.
So this is the last question I have. And I guess it's one to counteract the fatalistic feelings that you have and are sort of that we aren't immune to. So I asked you both about this question about pleasure. And what pleasure do you take out of your own work, or what pleasure do you have in making the work? Or is it a pleasure of displaying the work? Like at what parts is it pleasurable for you?
Well, for me, I mean, painting is the way that I move through this world. I mean, painting gives me the language. It's the way I process the world. So it's also anxiety makes me paint, and I paint large anxiety. So honestly, my pleasure is process. My pleasure is being in my little studio and working out all of the paintings.
Yeah.
Process gives me pleasure. So I guess, yeah, I've been running downstairs hiding from the news and then making my little paintings. So
Right.
that's how I've been dealing with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Process.
And I suppose there's a almost perverse pleasure in knowing that it's the system that's doing all this. That we have this, we can put our finger on it and say this is the root of the thing. I don't know how you would handle that word pleasure in reference to your work or the way you work.
Well, I think that my pleasure is in using my hands and using the materials that that I've chosen to really capture the essence, or what I feel to be the essence of these spaces, and that they, there's an era of modern sublimity to them.
Mm-hmm.
That is, people often think of Hudson River painters, and Frederick Church, and what have you, these magnificent vistas and so forth. And I feel that a lot of these spaces, this is our sublimity. This is our, this is where we stand in awe and shock and the power. And here it is that instead of it being Mother Nature, it has been created by us, which is really the insanity of it all.
Yeah, the paradox of it all.
Yes, the paradox.
Okay, I think I've dropped enough heavy questions here that probably some lighter questions would be of use and want from the audience.
Do I have questions?
So I'm gonna.
Okay. Let me check here. We do have some questions. Okay. Let's see. So there's a question about medium for Sheri, but we did touch on that. So Morgan, a question for you. How do you decide which paintings to offer your audience in a given exhibition, as there are so many sites that you have visited in your career? And if you could come up here and answer. Yeah, they won't be able to hear you.
You can hear me.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, it depends. Sometimes I choose the work, but more often than not, a curator decides, as is the case with this show here. I forget how many I sent, how many images I sent, and then whoever the exhibition committee cherry-picked what they wanted, and here you have it. So, yeah, it's rare that it's my decision. Usually it's because in many cases I've never been in the space, so the curatorial panel, what have you, has a much better understanding of their crowd and the interior and what works within that space.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see. The next question is for Sheri here. Your work is scaled very large. how did you manage to transition your work to a smaller workspace during this pandemic?
Ooh, that was a process. I mean, I haven't painted, I switched materials because usually the material leads with me. So I switched just, to watercolor markers and acrylic, and it was a process. But I had already gone down from paintings to I was playing with 40 by 50s and 36 by 48s, and I was taking closer views and playing with that space. So it's very different. The work I've created at home is very different. It works with the same source material, but it's become hard-edged, and it works through the space. It's a much quieter space and more about isolation and transformation. So it was a process, and it's going to keep going. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Looks like you have a couple more, Sheri.
Alrighty.
Let's see. And anything we don't answer today, any questions I can write up, and we can post them online as well.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Where did we leave off? Okay, so why not, how about this one? So you referenced car rides as a motivation for your work. If you could choose any other mode of transport that you have not experienced as inspiration, what would it be?
Oh, see, I've done buses, cars, and trains, and honestly, it's sort of about, it's not about creating an experience, it's about finding the experience. And I think that's going to be it for now. I don't think there's anything, I don't really choose to create something. I find it and create it. So it's more about contemporary life and how people travel with the windows through their phone camera. And so I'm not seeking any other mode of transportation at the moment. I'll think about that though.
Okay, so we actually have a next question for Steve.
Oh, no.
Yes.
I don't know the answer.
Someone here is asking, can you explain why Sheri and Morgan's work plays well together in this show? I know you were not the chooser of that, but you have been studying both of them, so.
One is simply landscape. And landscape, at least I find in Morgan's work, doesn't have to be exterior landscapes. They can be interior landscapes. And Sheri obviously is painting her impressions of these landscapes as they go by. A term that both Sheri and Morgan have used, and I might drag one of you up to talk about it, is this word sublime that I think really connects your work together, which is the sense, Morgan was saying, it's the sense of awe and almost awe, overwhelm, and I think in a classic sense of the word, there's a little bit of terror in it. So that seems to me to be a really binding force. Kind of a lesser force is the use of photography in making the work. That seems to be very clear for me. sure I'd have another 15 minutes to talk about it, like tomorrow. But that's what I have. That's what I have for now. So hopefully that answer was sufficient.
I think we'll do one more for Morgan, and then unless you all want to say some last words, I think we can wrap up, and we'll have some extra questions that we'll post on our website. Okay, Morgan. So let's see. Post-pandemic, where would you see your next international residency and why? And also, we do have a follow, well, I think it would make a nice wrap-up question. What advice do you have for young painters starting out now? For both of you.
Don't do it. Well, I've been very interested in the African continent, the impact of capital in the sense of foreign direct investment, the illusion that it brings, that it's somehow assisting these countries. And in fact, it's giving countries like the US, China, what have you, license to just ruin, environmentally speaking, these countries. So I would like to return to Africa. And I would also like to dabble back over in the Far East, China, and even there's a few going on too long here. So let's just say we'll start with Africa. Morgan, what's your advice?
Your advice for young painters?
Oh, I thought that was
For both of you?
My advice is to you have to be driven. You have to have very, very thick skin, because you're going to get rejection after rejection. And you have to develop a cohesive body of work. Now, initially, you're learning a craft, so a technique, or, so there's going to be an academic element. But then after you finish that, you really need to find a trajectory and stick with it, because the next step would be then applying for residencies, grants, exhibitions, things of that nature. And if you don't have a cohesive body, I sincerely doubt you'll get very many shows. And also, I would suggest that you professionally shoot your work, because that's what they're looking at. When you send them your work, your images. If your images are bad, they've received so many applications that you just swept right off the table. So invest in that professional to shoot your work.
Great advice.
All right, I guess I'm going a little bit different. Explore what moves you, and explore what excites you, and just do what really brings you pleasure, and everything will reveal itself. So, but really stay true to yourself and see where it takes you. That would be my advice.
Well, thank you all. I think we're about to, we only have Zoom until 6:30, but I think we're ready to wrap up. And thank you all again. I just want to reiterate that we'll get to all of the questions for you. We'll send them to Sheri and Morgan for you guys to think about more. And thank you all for coming. Yeah, and we'll do a quick pan of the show. Slowly. You all can see well, and I just want to say while we're slowly panning here, that everyone should come and visit in person. We are, if you feel comfortable, obviously. We're open Monday through Friday, 1 to 6, Saturdays 10 to 4, and Sundays noon to 4. And please wear your mask.
Anybody that wants to eat, I'll leave them up there.
Yes.
And make a cup of coffee. Bourbon Sunday. Oh, we will be in the
Yes,
show.
that is sold out. Yeah.
It's sold out?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Okay, thank you all. Do you guys want to come up here and wave,
Yeah.
wave while
Thank you.
people
Thank you for tuning
are?
in. Thanks so much. Hope to
Thank
see
you.
you in the space.